Hello and good morning or good afternoon. I'm not quite sure where I am in the schedule, so you might be watching this at a different time from what I was expecting. Just to say, my name is Carol Littlewood and I run a business called Littlewood Land Care. I've been asked today to talk about planning for biodiversity. I'm a farm conservation advisor, and as such I tend generally to advise on large farms, estates, and help them with biodiversity grant schemes, things like this. Agri-environment schemes, but there is no reason that sort of thing cannot translate down to a small holding. And there's a huge amount that you can do on a small holding, and also lots of things you can do without a huge budget. And so today that's what I'm going to focus on. I hope you'll bear with me because this is quite a strange way of recording a talk, and very often when I give a talk I would be responding to questions from the audience and things, and it would make it a lot easier to do. So hopefully I'll manage to be not too disjointed, and I will manage to cover all the things that were in the synopsis of what we were going to look at today. So firstly, if you really want to know how you're doing when it comes to biodiversity on your small holding, you've got to know where you are to start with. And so getting a base level is actually a really good thing to do. Now, when I say a base level, I don't mean you have to go and study every single species of plant and animal that you find on your farm, but just a sort of overall view of the sorts of things that are present. Maybe look at the sward in your grassland swards, try and get an idea of whether there's much diversity of wildflowers within them. Maybe even look around, see what insects, what butterflies, etc. you're doing. And birds are usually a good indicator as well. So try and get a rough idea of what species of bird you're seeing regularly, what birds maybe are breeding on the small holding rather than just passing through or feeding over the winter. And all these things will give you an idea of the sort of species that you might be able to benefit more, and also the sorts of species that you might be able to attract into the area. There are obviously a lot of textbooks that you can use to help you with identification of things like this. And there are also lots and lots of apps and things like that you can now go on. But please only take a lot of the apps as guides. Some of them are not as accurate as others and might tell you that you've got really weird and wonderful things on your small holding that you really haven't. So if you can, get photographs. They're always a good way of getting things identified. And look at joining various Facebook groups, because there are a lot of sort of interested amateurs who can be very helpful in these groups with identifying things. Again, just make sure that you always are reading to see whether people are absolutely sure of what they're identifying or whether they're just having a guess, because I do find that some of these websites, people have a guess at things when they don't really know what it is. But get yourself together a nice list of the plants, the trees, the wildlife on the farm in general, and this will probably make you feel really good about what you've got already, but also, as I say, will help you guide what you might be doing in the future. The main thing I'm usually brought in for is to draw up the plan, and it's very good to have a plan. Without a plan, you can end up not actually achieving anything, because obviously a plan will set you targets. A plan will also outline the actions that you can make. And along with the plan comes in things like budgeting and things like that. So it sounds really complicated, but the other thing to remember is that a plan is only what you're aspiring to. It doesn't actually have to happen. And if something happens, if you'd planned something and it doesn't work out, don't be hard on yourself. Just readjust and adapt your actions, and then just carry on and see what you can achieve. It might be that you don't plant the great big hedge that you'd planned. You maybe only get a small bit of it done, or you don't get as many nest boxes put up as you'd hoped. But if you get anything done, it is an achievement, and just remember that. As I say, the plan can include the budget, it can include the actions. So, for example, you might have an action in there which is a hopeful action. It might depend on there becoming budget available. And if you have quite an extensive number of actions, it means you can always be working on the smaller ones until a point where maybe agri-environment funding or something like that comes along and offers you up the opportunity to be able to afford to do something which 4 or 5 years ago might have just been a pie-in-the-sky aspiration. We all keep hoping that we might win the pools. That might be the reason, but who knows? There might be some reason that all of a sudden you find that you can achieve something which had only been a dream, if you like. Also, don't forget that, you might be thinking, oh, that would be a great place for a pond. But does it have to be a pond? Could it maybe be a scrape? Maybe don't always think for the biggest thing. Maybe try and, edge yourself back a bit and set yourself manageable targets. That's the thing to remember. Don't forget that, a wet area, a scrape, can be fantastic for all sorts of wildlife. It can be good for wading birds. It can be fantastic for invertebrates. So all those sorts of things are really good. It doesn't have to be, a pond costing you thousands of pounds to create. The other thing I would say when setting targets is to always remember that things take you longer than you think they're going to. So don't set yourself loads and loads of targets to achieve within the next year. Set yourself smaller targets and set them at a pace that you think are manageable. So give yourself maybe one target a year over the next 10 years. And don't be afraid to maybe fall back on one of them. And if you don't achieve it this year, maybe you'll achieve 2 things next year. So, all progress is great progress. And if you do manage to get 100 yards of fence of hedging planted rather than 500, then you still have achieved partially that target, and just pop the rest of the achievement back in for a later year when funding allows or anything like that. The other thing to remember is also, as well as having checked your baseline of your wildlife on the farm, as you work through your actions and start to achieve things, start to actually look back at what you had on your farm and look and see if anything has changed, whether you've got any new species, and try and monitor more closely the species that you've set as your target. So if you've set as your target tree sparrows, for example, then maybe try and keep account of the numbers that you're seeing, the number of successful nests, or the number of birds you're seeing coming to your table in the winter. And, that will give you an indication of whether the numbers on the small holding are going up and whether you're getting more success in keeping them around the place. Because you're recording lots of different things now on your farm, once you're into your action plan and things like that, you can start to feed into citizen science recording. And there are lots of places that you can actually record what you find on your farm. There's things like the NBN Gateway, which are used by very serious ecologists as well as by just people wanting to feed into the general collection. But there's also things like iSpot and things like that. And if you go onto your local biodiversity website, you'll probably find that they have actually got a number of different recording options on their website. I know that on the Tayside Biodiversity website, which is my local one, you can record swift sightings, you can record barn owl sightings. There's all sorts of things you can put in there. And there are annual surveys that are ongoing. Things like the mammal survey is something that seems to have been going for a long time. And more recently, you've got pollinator surveys and things like that you can feed into. And some of them are very, very basic. The pollinator survey, you just choose a plant, one of the pollen, that has a pollen source, and you record what insects you see going to it. You don't have to identify in each individual one. You can just say a bee, a butterfly, but you can feed into what is a national citizen science project and hopefully help with all sorts of advice and information that they're gathering there. So there's lots of things you can do. Get the kids involved. Really start to make it fun and get lots of different people helping you out as well, if that's the way you want to go. Right, so just to summarise all of that, make sure that you've got yourself a baseline to start with. Draw up a plan. Make sure that you've set yourself actions that you can achieve, and some maybe that are a bit more aspirational. You can do very simple things, like you can undertake to feed the birds regularly. You can make yourself bird boxes, and you can make your own because you can make them out of things like old pallets, and you can get lots of plans online. And make sure that you record things as you go along, if you've seen any increases, any new species, things like that. There may of course be options for funding under new packages coming out in 2024, but we don't know anything about those. But keep your ears out in the farming press and things like that, and that will update you on things like that. And good luck.